Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Gittin daf Ayin Zayin. We're going to begin in the middle of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph by the new parak. Says the Mishnah, Hazarik get leishto. A person doesn't hand the get to his wife, but he throws it at her. V'hi b'toch beita. Let's say she's in her home, o b'toch chatzera, or she's in her chatzer. And Rashi says the reason how she can have something is it's through nichse malug. And we say even though it lands on the ground, it's good. She's able to be kainit through her chatzar. And therefore, even though it wasn't actually put in her hand, since it went into her courtyard, it's ki'u, like it's in her hand, so far as she is now considered halachically divorced. However, zark la b'toch beito, let's say you throw into his house, o b'toch chatzero, into his courtyard, if hu ima, even if he's with her, b'mita, in the same bed, enim megareshas. Basically, the idea is that it's not hers. So if it's not her chatzer, so in that situation you would physically have to give it to her. However, let's say you put it into her lap, or she threw it into a bag, Rashi says, even if she's in your house, nonetheless, for some reason, because it's connected to her, it's right next to her, even though it didn't go into her hand, that's good enough. Says the Gemara, how do we know that this is the case regarding throwing a get into her chatzir, that it works? The pasuk says v'nasin biyada. It says literally you're supposed to put into her hand. Now, ainli el yada, in her hand. I don't know. You could also put it into her courtyard, into her roof, or her like patio. V'nasan mikol makom. The fact that it says v'nasan, so then itself should tell you that just as long as it's given to her, it doesn't matter how. Even in a sina koldahu, any form of giving is acceptable. But Tanya Mihachi, Gabi Ganav. We actually have the same din regarding a Ganav, which we're going to see pretty soon when we get to Seder Nezikin, Baba Kam, Baba Mitziyam. It says like this: when it comes to a Ganav, Yadai, Ainli Elo Yadai. When it comes to a Ganav, it's not only when it's in his hand, how do we know if it's also in his Rishus? Talmud Leimer, Himatzi Timatzi Mikol Makom. That a ganav is kainit, and obviously he should have stolen it, but it's not just when it's in his hands, also when it's in his courtyard. Maybe it works when it comes to a get because you can divorce her against her will. So therefore, maybe we say it doesn't have to go into her hand, just give it to her in any way, and she has to accept it. Of a ganav, the leis about karche emalo, says Rashi, the lo mechayev ishadya inish al karche. Maybe when it comes to a ganav, you should not be chayev if a person throws it against his will. Emalo, says Rashi, ema medaita nami lo tiknile chatzero. Even if he did it intentionally, his chatzer will not be kaina. Imol mashach, if he didn't actually do mashiach, going nichnach al tzero v'no b'faneha. Let's say, for example, an animal chances into your property and you lock the door, so you never physically touch the animal. So the question is, how do we know that that's also constitutes a form of geneva? Because it's not something that you would do against your will. So maybe even with your will, it still wouldn't work. Maybe the reason why we're going to punish him and say he's going to, even his chatzer's kaina, is because we want to be very strict with him. And therefore, it's like a penalty, even though really maybe it doesn't normally work, a chatzer. So now we say what? That her chatzer is kainet. In fact, the Gemara, we know that whatever a woman acquires, it goes to her husband. So the second that the husband throws it into her chatzer, it's not really her chatzer. And therefore, even if it is, let's say, halachically her chatzer, the reality is that anything that goes into that chatzer is not hers. So Amar Abelezer, B'kaisav lo dinu devarim enim b'nei chosayich. And this is going to be question number one. So he actually wrote, I'm going to see it has to be written, I have nothing to do with any of your possessions. So therefore I don't have any right to your possessions, to your chutzner, or anything that falls into it. V'kasav lahachi my hobby. So if you write this, how's that help? Bosanya, Hermel Chavero, Dinabarim Enli al Sadazu, the Enli Asik Ba, Viadi Masalekas, Menelom Klum. If you say all these different things, and let's say Rashi says, we're talking about a case where you're a partner, you already have shutfus, you already have a connection to it, so you said nothing. Since it's already yours, it doesn't help to say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. That those words or even writing down l'chara shouldn't be enough. So how does it work over here? A marriage is similar, like a shutvis. She gets something, goes to him. So what does him writing this help? So I'm going to Rabbi Yani b'kaisav law v'odarusa. Two things. First of all, we see he has to write it down, but it's the time when they were just an arusa, which means he didn't have any halachic rights at that point. So if he wrote din advarim in lim chasayich, so then it works. Even though the chachamim say you have rights to it, so you're able to relinquish those rights because it's for your benefit. If you wish not to benefit from it, okay, gesundheit, hey, you don't have to. But it has to be that it was written then, says Rashi. Din advarim ba'oida arusa kaidim shezach b'nechasim. It has to be before you were zaycha any of these things. You actually do not even have to write it in the language of a matana. Why? Because of Rav Kahana. Who's that? Says the Gemara. Rav Kahana. Diyam Rav Kahana. When it comes to a inheritance, possessions that come from another place, says Rashi, Sheni Yerushas Avoisa Minatayra. It's not an inheritance from the father. So the din is Adamasna leha shlo yerashena. A person can make a condition. Rashi says kaidim shezacha before you're kainit, before you have the rights to be kainit. You can make a stipulation and say I don't want it because it's in your benefit. So if you don't want it, so you can say I'm not going to want this. Obviously, once you're zoicha to it, so that's it. You can't do it. You can't say I don't want it because it's yours. Maybe you can be mafkir afterwards. Okay. But that wouldn't help in this situation, throwing a get. This Gemara is mentioned in multiple places as we continue to Ayin Zayin Mabeis. If a person says, I appreciate the Chachamim looking out for me, but I'm not interested in the Takana of the Chachamim, Kagonzu, Shemin like this one. We're going to listen to him. The question is, what is this Kagonzu? My Kagonzu? That a woman can say to her husband, now the truth is, she's supposed to get mezainis from her husband, and in return she gives the masyodeha. Now the reason why is because maybe she's not going to really produce so much. So it's actually always in her favor. If she doesn't make a lot of money, you still have to provide for her mazonos. Yes, she'll give you the $10 or whatever she made that day. But you still have to give her the $50 worth of food. However, if let's say she's a very successful woman, she could say, you know what? You don't give me mezainis, I'm not going to give you masiyah. And therefore that's something where she's allowed. So when it comes to Kanas Chachamim, as long as it hasn't happened yet, which is B'shas Erison, then you can make that statement. Rabbi Omer atu what? Yadam milu kanyule labal. When it comes to the hands, not kaina, says Rashi. Rava Omer, Oilam b'deloy kasav adedavar. You didn't write anything. Udikashalach mashikatz isha kana rabba abala, that it should go to the husband. So he says again this question atu yada milu kanyule labal. And Rashi's Lokami Parech Mahi, Gemara is going to elaborate on that statement. Regardless, he gives a second answer. What does that mean? When she has, the question is, how does she have a yad? If she finds Masyodeha, as soon as she picks it up, it's the husband's. So the question is, or a mitzvah rather, right? It should go immediately to the husband. But we say, Gittin v'yada boin ke'echad. Says Rashi, Al Yidei Haget Ba Yada La'im Nesinasai. The reason why she can be makabel the get is because as soon as she gets the get, her hand comes at the same time as the get. And therefore, even though the fact that happens simultaneously, we say that once the get is put down, she actually has rights to whatever is in her hand. And therefore, it's the same thing. Whatever falls into the chutzner would be the same. Question number 1. So again, how is she able to be kaina? So the two answers, either b'kaisel of either rusa ainli al sadazu, and I have no connection to this field, or gita v'chatzera boin kiachad. Okay. Omerle Ravinu Rav Ashi Rava Yad Isha Kakashile. So Rav is saying, I have a question about the hand. How could she be even makabel to get with her hands? Nehi, granted the kanila lamasyadeha, that the husband does have rights to her masyadeha when she works. He gets that. But yada gufa mikanile, what's this whole question? She doesn't own her hands. Those are her hands. So what does that mean? So Amalei Rava Yad ha'eved kakashile is actually asking a question not regarding the woman, but rather the yad, the hand of an eved. It says Rashi shegufu kanu, because when it comes to an eved, you actually, so to speak, own his body. Umekabel shichruhu ba'atzmoi. Yet somehow he's able to be makabel his shtar for himself. So if in fact there's a din that you can give the shtar to the eved, and by you giving him this emancipation proclamation, this document stating that he's free, it works and he's free. How is that shaykh? Yad eved kiad rabadamya. In other words, we're not talking about the woman. The question he was asking is not how can a woman makabel to get. She has her own rights with her hands. She has her own hands. But when it comes to an eved, which are gufa kaina, how could an eved be makabel his get shecher? Well, he shouldn't be able to be makabel. The answer is because it happens at the same time. Hu shchemira. So we have the story of a person who was dying. To kosavla gittin de besu, and as we've seen many times, this person decides to write a get to his wife. Bahadi panya de mali shabbata, and this was in the onset of Erev Shabbos. V'hispik l'meisvola, but because it was moments before Shabbos, okay, you're dying, you still have to keep Shabbos, and you can't give a get on Shabbos, so he didn't have an opportunity to deliver to her. Well, machar, the next day, Shabbos rolls around, Tokif le'alma, the world was getting quite heavy. What does that mean? It says Rashi, B'hai yari pen yomos. He was concerned that he is likely to die, and therefore, if he doesn't give her this get, because he's going to die, and get liachmisa, so she's going to end up having to be zokek liyavam. And again, Rashi says you can't be mataltal get on Shabbos and give it to her. So what do? So also come to Rabbi Lahu zilu go imrule, and tell the dying man likni nihili lahu duchta, to allow that the place, the yasib gita, where the get is, that it should be there. It should be hers. Says Rashi, kabal duchta the machas bagita leisha. He should basically, wherever the get is, in some desk, right on the top of a desk or whatever. So let her be kaina that whole physical space, and therefore she'll be kaina it b'chazaka the karkanikna b'chazaka, because you can be kaina it with chazaka. How can she be kaina it? The tezel ihi, she'll go. The teichud, she'll close the door of the office. The tiftach, and then open it. The taksik bay, and then she'll have a chazaka on it, and therefore she'll it's hers. It's like it's her rishus. Ditnan noyel gadar paratz kol shehu harizu chazaka. That this is a way of creating a chazaka by closing the door, opening the door. Only Rav Elish Rava masha kansi isha kanabala. Sounds lovely, but how does that work? Because even if, let's say, she's kind of b'chazaka, but whatever she's kind of goes back to her husband, so it doesn't really accomplish much l'chayra. So the Gemara says, Ichsif, he was a little bit embarrassed, seemingly he got him. L'saif, at the end, Igle Milsid Yarusa Havoy. it turned out that this woman was actually not, it wasn't Nisuin yet. It was only Erison, which she would still be Zakuk, but he didn't have any rights to her property. So Omarava im Amru, fine. So it says Rashi, so she was an Arusa. So therefore that's the reason why it could have worked. It's because he didn't have rights to her yet. So it would have actually worked. The reality is that even on the Nesua, he's able to have her do this. But this was said before. It says Rashi, why was he so embarrassed? Ki parcha Rav Elish, so when this question was posed, because Ki Amarava Hai Maisa Amra, says Rashi. The answer we said before, the Hai Maisa Amra Basar, the Hadar Svara. This was said after this logic. Now, if she's in his house, it doesn't work. Actually, let's see the language of the Mishnah. So, actually, this is where it is a get. Hazar get lishto, and she is in her house. She is by the chatzor, which is mashma. If she's on vacation in Paris, you can't put the get in her home in Borough Park. So says the Gemara like this. V'hibatach besa. So Amar Ula v'husha medus b'tzad besa b'tzad chatzer. She physically has to be there. No, feel he b'tver v'chatzer b'tzipayri. Doesn't make a difference, even if she's in a different location. He b'tzipayri v'chatzer b'taveria. Migreshus. Doesn't matter. She doesn't physically have to be in the same location. Okay. So the Mishnah sounds quite clear that she has to be there. It's as though she's there. What do you mean she's as though she's there? She's not there. It's considered to be a chatzer mishtameres. So very interesting. So if you have a house and you have the keys to the house, and you have a lock, and you have a camera in your house that you can look on your cell phone. So you're not physically in the house, but it's a chatzer mishtamera. So it's ki'ilu like you're actually there. So it's being protected and guarded. You don't have to even physically be there. So therefore, the fact is, even if she's not there, just as long as it's a chatzer mishtameras, that would be sufficient. And therefore, it's ki'ilu like she's actually there. And that would be good enough. So maybe if this is machlokas, whether you have to physically be there, is the question is, do we learn a chatzer is like a hand, or it's like a shliach? So if it's like a hand, says Rashi, just like your hand is pretty close to your torso, right? If you stretch it, doesn't make any difference. It's still close to you. So too, you need to be close to your chatzer, or maybe it's like a shliach. So a shliach can be makabel get, even though they're far away from you. Look, the kul chatzer mishum yadas rabya. So if it's hand, so you should have to be there. No, mar savar ki yada, it's like a hand. What's that? Ma yada besmucha al chatzer besmucha. You have to physically be nearby. But if you're in Sipori and the chatzer is in Tveria, no. V'yidach, no. If you want to learn like a hand, my yada b'devuka av chatzer b'devuka has to be dovuk, has to be physically attached to you. Obviously, you can't compare it exactly like a hand. El v'kiyada, my yada mishtameres l'daita av chatzer mishtameres l'daita afuka chatzer mishtameres l'daita. It has to be that just like your hand, you know where your hand is, right? You know where your hand's been. So too, when it comes to a chatzer, only if it's a chatzer mishtameres, as opposed to if it's not. So now we have another story. A person, he threw a get to his wife. And she happened to be in the chatzer. Instead of it landing on the ground, it fell on a piece of wood. Okay. Rashi says, Al gavi chatichas eitz, pieces of wood. So Rav Yosef Chazin, we look. If this pisla is like almost like a rishus b'fnei atzmai, which is 4 amos by 4 amos, Polgli Rishus L'Nafshe. So it's not considered to be a get, because it's like a separate Rishus, says Rashi. Ve'enu batal gabi chatzer. It's not considered to be batal to the chatzer because it's so significant. Ve'enu megareshes l'kami parach hechidam. You have to establish exactly what the case is here. So we're making a distinction. If it's 4 by 4 amos, then it's not a get. But if it's less, it's small, so therefore it's insignificant. It's batal to the chatzer. So b'ma'askinan. If we're talking about it's his chatzer, ki havi dalad amos ma'hav. So dida, it's hers. So the fact that it's dalad amos, again, Elaim b'chatzer dida, it's referring to her chatzer. So if it's hers, ki havi dalad amos ma'havi. Who cares that's dalad amos? She owns the whole thing. So what's the difference if it lands on a table, how big that is? The reality is she owns the whole area. Ella b'chatzer didei. We must be talking about his chatzer. So ki loy havi arba amos ma'havi. Who cares that the pistol is less than 4 by 4 amos? It's not hers. So it's not hers. It shouldn't make any difference. So mamonoshach. Let's read. We did it for the following case. The oish lo makoim, that he lent her space. He lent her space. Now we say it like this: Now you're only one person. You can only be in one room in a house at a time, right? No matter how big your house is. So the reality is, I'm renting something out to you. I only want you to be in one. I only want you to take one place. So therefore, since I'm giving you a place, I'm giving you the chutzner to rent out. So if it lands on the earth, on the ground, okay, fine. But if it lands on the pisla, it's not one of the things that I rented out, and therefore it's not yours. That's why it's taloi if the pisla is that measurement. So that's one answer. That's the answer. Volmar and Eladol Gabo Asara. The only time we say this whole din, if it's not 10 tvachim high. Of a Gabo Asara, if it's 10 tvachim high, Afagadoi Havi Arba Amos. Even if it's not 4 by 4 amos, still the fact that it's above 10 tvachim, which again regarding Hilchas Shabbos, that already removes, let's say, if you're in a Rishus Harabim, anything above 10 tvachim is makom patur. It's like a totally different location. So too over here, even if it happens to be that it's if it's gavo asara, that doesn't matter. Even if it's less than 4 by 4, it's considered like a Rishus B'Fiatzmai. Vol amran el delay slay, as we continue to Ayin Ches Amadal Shem Lavai. Although easily Shem Lavai, if it has a distinguished separate name, Afagav Deloy Gabo Asar Afagav Deloy Havi Arba Amos. Question 2 in TA 16. Hashilo Makom B'Chatzeroy Liknois Boget Yesham Pisla Beil Ufanim Chaylik Pisla Makom Atzma Nein Migreshas. It's very similar to question TA 16. So in the event that it's wide 4 by 4 amos, or it's above 10 tvachim, or it has a shem levai, it has a distinguished different name. So in all those different situations, the din would be the same. Okay, let's hold off there. We're going to get straight. We're going to go to the Mishnah, but we have over here actually TB 16. My taima, the ula, the boy gets shoymenis b'chad b'tzad chatzera. Why is it necessary that ula says that you mamish need to be right by your chatzar? What is the reason? TB 16. So as we just said, it's because kivan the chatzar mishum yada sravya smuch b'idin dumidi yada, because it has to be just like a hand. And since a chatzar, just like your hand is near you, right? So too, when it comes to the chatzar, you need to be near the chatzar. Okay. Weiter. Afiluhu ima b'mita. Okay, let's go back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that if, let's say, he throws the get into his house, even if he's there with her, b'mita, in the bed, which sounds a little bit hard to understand, in a migrashas, it's not good because it's not hers. It's not her chatzar. However, okay, let's just see that for now. So it says the Gemara, "Afilu hu ima b'mita." Amar Rabba, lo shanu. The only time we say this din is ella b'mita shaloi, if it's his bed. El b'mita shalom igreshes. But if it's her bed, then it is a divorce. Okay. It says Rashi, Aval pi shibatech beso, even though it's in his house, right? But she owns the bed, so it's a good. It works. Okay. We'll have to see the reason why, because this is considered to be like a kli of, let's say, a loikeach and the rishus of the moicher. Okay. So we're going to get into that now. So, lo shano el b'mita shaloi, el b'mita shalom igreshes. Tanya mehachi. Rabbi Lezer oim b'mita shaloi igreshes. B'mita shalom igreshes. That's what he said. Now, b'mita shalom igreshes, when it comes to her bed in his house, if the get is thrown onto her bed, it works. That is a case of kelev shaloi keach. Like, she's like the buyer. She wants to acquire something, right? Which is the get. So if you throw the get onto the bed, it's like a keli. The bed is like a vessel of the buyer. Rishus meicher, even though it's in the rishus of the meicher, in this case it will be the husband, who shemami na kelev shaloi keach rishus meicher kanolei keach. That's what it sounds like. And this is nisht poshit. Not everyone holds that is in fact the din. It's actually a machlokas in Baba Basra. Our answer is l'tzricha de gavoa sara. We're talking about a different situation. The bed is 10 tefachim above the ground. So says Rashi, davi rishus l'nashe. The reason why you could be kind of something on her bed is because the bed is very high, and since it's high up and there's all this space on the bottom, there aren't drawers on the bottom of this bed. There's all this space. V'chashiva hu aviru rishus moicher. The airspace in between, which is all this 10 tvachim, isn't able to cause any problem to be mavatal the rishus l'kli. Avika makim kare, but the legs are touching the ground, which is owned. So what's the image of 10 tvachim? So a makim kare lo kapi inchi. Those small poles on each of the four sides, that's insignificant because you still have a lot of utility that can be used under the bed for storing shoes and the like. Okay. Fine. Right. And then the Mishnah concluded, if let's say you happened and she's in the man's house, but you throw it not into her hands, that certainly would be good, but into her lap or into her basket. By it's the same question. Some Rabbi Yehuda talking about where the basket is hanging from her body, so it's like connected to her. It's tied, even though it's not hanging, says Rashi. El nigreris bekarka, even though it's dragging on the ground, that still works because the fact that it is kosher, it's tied to her, that's enough that she's koined. It's referring to where the basket is placed like in her lap, says Rashi. Even though, let's say she's sitting on the ground, ein adam makmid al kol makom moishav ishto. No one cares about the place where she's sitting. And therefore she would be kind of anything that falls into her lap. Omar, fine. Okay. We're talking about a situation where the husband sells baskets. So this house is filled to the brim with baskets, says Rashi. He's not makbid because that's what the whole house has anyway. He's like, hey, what is this basket doing here? What do you mean? You sell baskets for a living. Rabbi Yochanan, the place where her lap is, kunila, she's koined. Makam kalata kunila, she's koined. So Rabba, my time Rabbi Yochanan. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that she's koined that? Person's not makbid on that space, on her lap and her basket, that these are things that she can be kind of. And person's not going to be makbid on that. You throw the get into her lap, into her basket, anything which is like a basket, what does that mean? Anything like it? Like a sackcloth in which she eats dates. In other words, some type of a picnic basket or some type of a bag where she has her snacks in. Question, we're going to stop there, obviously. Question 3. Nosen get al mita, you throw a get onto her bed, homedis reshuso, in his reshus, he megarashas. So, if it's above 10 tvachim, it's definitely megarashas. If it's less than 10, it's a machlokas whether you hold the din of kilo shalokech reshus moicher is kind of like kech. Okay. No. Adkan.